Okay, I see that smile on your face, Avril. It's a big smile. We want to thank you for being a guest on Unfiltered Unspoken Podcast, where we share life experiences of others in hopes that someone will connect so that they can start the journey to healing. It is an honor to have you once again, and we're going to bringing up Avril Brown. She's going to tell you a little bit, introduce herself, and then Sid is going to kick off the first question.
Hey, so I am Avril, and thank you so much for having me. I am a mom, an awakened mom coach and a mind body practitioner, and I work with moms to really find freedom through deeply connecting with themselves. Um, because for me, motherhood was the catalyst for so much healing for me. It was the catalyst for changing my whole life, and I truly feel that motherhood is an initiation, and through this journey, we can transform so much of what was previously not healed, but also we have, as role models for our children, we are powerful for changing the trajectory of their future. And yeah, this was the biggest journey for me, and it was what changed what previously in my life I couldn't change all by myself, because all of a sudden I had a reason bigger than me for doing something, for doing the work.
That's wonderful. And well, just to get right into it, we normally, start from the beginning, kind of get to know your why, and kind of the trajectory of your life and how you, got to where you are now in your healing journey. So what was life like growing up for you? Did you experience any traumas while young, or was your childhood generally very well? What was your, home life like growing up?
My home life was pretty, what I would say, I had a good childhood. When I reflect now, there was a lot of stuff that, little stuff. So there was no big dramatic traumas. But when I look back, because I was incredibly sensitive as a child, I took on a lot of stuff that was not mine to take on. I took on a lot of my parents' feelings. I took on a lot of their emotional stuff that they didn't pass on to me, but I took on. And I'm fully aware of just the level of sensitivity I had. And then as I grew up, there was a lot of reflection from other people of me being too sensitive, me being too much, me being not enough. And so all of that was really traumatic for me, but in a very subtle way, in a really, really subtle way. I experienced a lot of bullying in school. Right throughout, from when I started school at 4, right throughout when I left at 17, there was a lot of bullying with other girls, and I was in boarding school from I was 12, so that was probably the biggest catalyzing negative change for me in my growing up experience, was being in boarding school, separated from my family, um being in an environment that I felt I couldn't escape from. So yeah, my childhood was quite non-dramatic, but moving forward then with the bullying and just feeling like there was always something wrong with me. I was the middle child of 6, so I felt as a child I didn't have much value in who I was for myself. And again, that wasn't necessarily something other people made me feel. It was definitely something that, just because of the circumstances, when you're one of 6, that's kind of what happens. Middle child. So a lot of the stuff was definitely related to my personality, but also picking up on other people's the pain of my parents, and picking up on that and carrying that with me when it wasn't my responsibility.
That's deep. That's deep because a lot of folks don't acknowledge that they're carrying on their parents' pain. Um, I want to go back to the bullying real quick though.
Mhm.
Um, did what kind of traumas? What kind of how did the bullying traumatize you? Because I know there had to be some effects of folks bullying you. And did you let your parents know that you were being bullied? And did they do anything about it?
Um, so the bullying was quite subtle. It was, and I'm sure so many of the females out there can grasp this. It was that really subtle, clicky, catty, bitchy, whatever you want to call it, girl gangs. I'm not going to be your friend today. That sort of stuff. There was also some more not subtle stuff from like other like boys on the school bus and things like that. But how did it affect me? It definitely affected how I saw myself. I felt like I was never good enough. I felt like I never fitted in. I felt like I never belonged. I tried to mold myself to fit in with the different groups, and there was nobody I really felt like I resonated with. So I always felt like I was different, and that who I was as my inherent being was not enough. It was not enough to fit in with these people. Did I tell my parents? I think at a low level they were aware, but I certainly didn't express to them the extent of what it was, because I don't think I knew at the time how big it was. I just knew that it was so big that I suppose I was shutting down because of it. So I don't think I spoke to them about the full extent of it.
And have you learned that, your personality or just kind of, how you were naturally, have you been able kind of in your journey of things, is there, a name to it? Was it something going on that you just didn't know was actually going on? Or is that really how you were? Just for example, me, I knew I always had weird quirks about myself. But then, at 30 plus years old, I found out it's ADHD. So, was the way that you kind of were, with making friends, being social, things like that, have you learned that it was anything, just different from being, kind of unique, or was it just that?
No, I haven't. I definitely know I'm a highly sensitive person. I also, my child is neurodiverse, so I'm aware that there is some stuff that may be labelled as, could be labelled as anything today, but it's I have never been labelled. I've never sought a diagnosis of any description, because I actually truly feel that it's just my level of sensitivity, that it's who I really am. Underneath it all. And I think I came into this world with a dysregulated nervous system, and because of that, then I was more susceptible to all of the stimulation and dysregulation going on around me, and that my sensitivity was because and is because of that. And I think as I've gotten older, I've realized, and I've regulated my nervous system, and I've done a lot of healing, a lot of those sensitivities have disappeared, so to speak. I'm not so sensitive to noise. I'm not so sensitive to a lot of the stuff. So I don't think they were necessarily deep-seated. I think a lot of it was related to my nervous system being dysregulated.
So what are some of the sensitivities that you carried into adulthood?
I was definitely sensitive to it's like right up until I started my healing journey and started the nervous system work, sensitive to noise, sensitive to light, acutely aware, I'd call it like hypervigilant of my surrounds, things that were going on around me, anything that could potentially be danger. Like startle, I have quite an extreme startle reflex. Those are probably the most, also really sensitive to people's moods, to other people's vibes, to other people's energy, to other people's emotion, as if it was potentially going to be threatening to me. So yeah, those are probably the main ones, and they are also the ones that have definitely lessened the further along my healing journey I've gone.
That's awesome. And what, I guess, moving forward after, let's say your boarding school experience. No, actually, let's stay there. Let's stay at boarding school. How, you kind of told us how that was, being away from home and things like that. But how was your actual experience, at boarding school, outside of the, bullying and things like that? was there anything else going on that kind of, shaped you or helped mold you into, even needing the healing?
Mm-hmm. Yes, a massive amount, because it was my teenage years, and that's when we kind of form or step more into our identity of recognizing who we are. And for me, I realized then that one of my other sensitivities, now that I remember, is I'm really sensitive to pain, to my own pain, to other people's pain, to hurt. My emotions were very big, but I squashed them down as a child and going into school. And so I realized, especially in boarding school, that this the pain was very big for me, and that in order to cope with everything that was going on around me, because I didn't have a safe place to be, my environment was unsafe, that I had to shut myself down. And so I threw myself into studying, because studying I could do really, really well. So I became an A student, and everything was focused on studying harder, doing more, being more achieving in that way. And so I had planned to go on and become a doctor. That was what I was focusing on. I was going to be a doctor. And then at 14, I developed anorexia. And that was where everything started to shift and change dramatically for me. I realized that this was a way for me to not have to feel my pain anymore. This was, and I didn't develop it to get thin, or it was nothing to do with the diet. It was a level of somewhere in my life I had some control over, and it was a way to be able to numb the pain I was feeling. So I was able to, and it grew bigger and bigger, to a point where it controlled me. Essentially, I didn't control it anymore, and I had no control over my life, because it's such a big addictive, sort of mind numbing, but also body numbing experience. So I developed it at 14. I was still in school. I almost died when I was 16 from just the effects of anorexia. And after that, I recovered sort of to a higher functioning place, but I was still very much in the throes of anorexia and anorexic behavior until after my son was born. Yeah, so that developed in school and consumed the next 20 years of my life, pretty much.
So the anorexic behaviors, did that come from you focusing just on studying and achieving? Because I know you said it came from pain, but what would make you have anorexic behaviors? Why would you turn to that? And I guess you took that into adulthood as well?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So when I reflect on it, I know that I was there was a lot of internal pain that I didn't want to feel. So essentially, it's a bit like any other addiction. Whenever we have a behavior that can support us to numb the pain, and obviously at the time I wasn't conscious that it was a total subconscious thing. It wasn't something I was doing consciously, but it gave me an element of control where the whole rest of my life felt totally out of control. So there was nothing else I couldn't control. I didn't feel I could get out of high school. I thought it felt like I was in a big dark tunnel, and my only exit from that place was when I was going to be 18, when I left high school. So, and it felt like I had no control. I had no control over the bullies. I had no control over anything. And so the anorexia gave me, it was something I could control. I could control food. I could control this effect in my life. So it felt like, when I reflect now, I can see that it gave me both an element of control and allowed me to numb my internal pain. So it allowed me to shut off the fact that I was being bullied. It allowed me to shut off the fact that there was no escape for me. It allowed me to shut off the fact that I felt there was nobody I could talk to about this, that I didn't feel understood by other people, that I didn't feel safe. It allowed me to be in my own zone, so to speak. And it's very much like addictive behavior. It's when I talk to people, I have never been addicted to drugs or alcohol, but when I talk to people who have, there is such a deep resonance with the same sort of behaviors and the same need to escape that they have had.
Understood. Understood. And how were you able to, I guess, let it carry on so long,
Mm.
while getting almost fatally sick, without anyone kind of knowing what was going on with you?
Okay, so people did definitely know because I was so emaciated. So they knew what was going on. However, I I wasn't able to get the support that actually made a difference. I went to therapy for quite a long time to different therapists. We had family therapy, but nothing really seemed to make a difference. And so as time went on, I did eventually meet a therapist who had experienced an eating disorder herself, so she actually got it. And in that time, that was when I started to make some shifts physiologically. So I made a lot of shifts physically. I made a few shifts mentally, but I never made enough shifts to fully heal from it mentally. But I did gain enough weight after sort of from when I was 17 plus, I gained enough weight to be more high functioning. And so it wasn't in a life threatening phase from then on. So initially, I went to see lots of different therapists within our medical centre because I'm in Ireland, because I was in Ireland at the time. And I did get support, but nothing. There was a lot of therapists who'd studied a lot of books and they knew the theory behind how I should heal, but they didn't get me again. So it just felt like I was moving from one place of being misunderstood to another place of being misunderstood. They didn't get me, and so their therapy didn't really work. So I almost knew how to work the system, which sounds really manipulative, but I knew what I had to do to be able to get the tick of approval from them, but it wasn't actually healing me at a deep level. So like I said, eventually I did meet a therapist who was able to support me to gain the weight and make some steps forward, but it never got to a deep healing level until after my son was born.
Wow. So your parents didn't support you even though they found out you had an anorexic disorder. What was their response?
Yeah, no,
What kind of support did they give?
they were very supportive. So they did take me out of
Mm-hmm.
school, out of the boarding side of
Mm-hmm.
school. So I still went to school. So they were as supportive as they knew how to be, because we're
Okay.
talking 30 years ago, in the west coast of Ireland, there was minimal support for anorexia back then. There was the only support that was available was really going into the psychiatric department of the hospital and being pumped full of calories to be spat back out again. But there was none of the deeper sort of healing or trauma work or going into that real therapeutic place. I think that's evolved a lot in the last 30 years. But back then, they definitely went down all of the avenues that they could, but it still didn't touch the surface. And I don't in any way think that they could have done any different, because that was what was available at the time. And I also know that yeah, I have had a very anorexia. Any addiction is a very, very, you have to have a very strong mind to be that destructive towards yourself. And there has to be a lot that you are trying to protect yourself from through the disorder, because you're essentially taking trying to take away your own life source. It's like a slow version of killing yourself. It's not easy. It's a lot. It's a it's a painful experience. So the pain that you're hiding has to be a lot more than that in order to get away from it. So I don't blame the therapist or my parents. I just think that the level of support, especially back then, wasn't deep enough for the level of healing that I needed.
All right. Yeah, I just wanted to clarify the support piece.
Yeah.
Like, where did the? Yeah. Okay.
Um, what was my question here? Um, oh, how, I guess, how did you really get introduced to that? Was it, something you seen work for somebody else and you decided to try it? Was it something you just kind of didn't know was an actual thing and you just thought maybe starving yourself would, get the job done? How was the idea really put in your head, or convinced yourself that that's what you were going to do?
It didn't, and it wasn't. It just kind of slowly evolved, I think. I just started eating less and less, and yeah, it's really weird, and it's such a beautiful question. I love that you've asked this. Um, because it wasn't a conscious choice at all. It was just a slow, progressive thing that I think happened and was effective at numbing me. And like I said, it was something that I actually had control over, but it was never a conscious choice. And I love that, yeah, like I said, I love that you've asked that question because it's allowing me to reflect. But I think, like any addiction, once you're in it, it's much harder to get out of it, even if you didn't make a conscious choice to get in there in the beginning. I think it just worked. But it was definitely a slow thing. It wasn't like I woke up one morning and decided I'm not going to eat anymore. I don't even think I knew what I was doing when it started. It was just, yeah, it just evolved. And obviously I went through a period then where I really struggled to eat because the weight side of things came in, where it was like, I don't want to gain weight. But that was never my initial thing. That was just a byproduct of what happens when your mind is starved so much, or at least that's what happened for me, where my mind was starved so much, is that my cognitive abilities kind of shut down and it became more focused on the weight and the weight gain. But it wasn't, yeah, I do remember a specific incident in high school where I thought to myself, I will never be hurt by other people. It was a particular bullying incident. And I thought to myself, I will never let people hurt me like that again. And that happened when I was about 14. I think I was definitely in the experience of anorexia then. But there was this one incident where I thought, nobody will ever hurt me like that again. And which is ironic because now I'm such a big deep feeler and I'm so open and I'm so vulnerable and I'm so raw. But I just don't feel the need for that same level of protection because I have the resources inside of me now to deal with it, whereas I didn't back then.
So I have powerful, very powerful. What was the smallest weight that you were, and did you look in the mirror and say, you know what, I look sick?
Do you have a trigger warning on this? On the show, just for people who have anorexia, giving weights can be really, really triggering for them because they can think, I can get to that weight and still be okay and still live. And so that is something that there's a part of me that doesn't want to disclose, but I will disclose it was the weight of about a 3-year-old, 4-year-old. Yeah, I know. Now I'm short, so I'm 5 foot. So that's not excusing it or saying it's okay. But it was really low. And like I said, I don't want to disclose the actual weight because it was it's not because I have a shame of it, but because I'm concerned that it could be a trigger thing. And did I look in the mirror? I think I did. I knew logically, I knew 100% I was very sick. I knew without a doubt I was very sick. And I knew I was very thin, but I felt disgusting in myself. I had such a deep sense of self-loathing. I felt disgusting. I felt like there was something so deeply like rotten inside of me. And I felt fat, but it wasn't knowing I was fat, and it wasn't related to a physical thing. It was just a word that I used to describe the ugliness I felt inside.
Was there any, um, I guess, specific moments that maybe stood out to you where I guess kind of in your subconscious you knew that like fat is just something that you didn't want to be, or like one of your kind of biggest concerns? Was there some like, kind of mental event that, kind of sparked that whole idea for yourself?
No, it was literally never related to weight for me. It again, when I reflect, it was it was an it was an accessible tool to support me not to have to feel the pain. So it was because smoking was just a no-no for me. Um, Drugs were not available where I lived, and at the school I was at. I mean, I'm sure they were if I'd looked for them. Also, alcohol, I knew I would never drink. I grew up in Ireland. Alcohol was destroying lives everywhere, and families everywhere. And for some reason, this developed for me, but it was never ever about the weight until there was that moment that like where my mind was so caught up in it that it became about not being fat. But it was never the word fat is more just like I said to describe this horrible feeling that I felt about myself inside, but it wasn't, and it was actually more rotten than fat, but that was just the word that I used. It was never about the actual physiological. Like my mom never dieted. I didn't grow up with diet culture around me. I didn't even in school. I don't even remember, even in high school, lots of people going on diets. I never remember any of that. So it wasn't a world I was particularly familiar with. It was definitely, yeah, a behavior to deal with the pain rather than a conscious thing of I don't want to be a certain shape or size.
Got it. And I have a follow-up question. I'm sorry.
Mhm.
Um, were there any, I guess, material or tangible affirmations to the choices you made? Like, was there anything that kind of confirmed your decision? Were people, complimenting you on, changes and things that they didn't know was going on? Like, was there anything that you were receiving confirmation on to continue that behavior?
I don't remember initially. I do remember my mum being very concerned when I came home from high school one weekend, because we used to come home every second weekend, and an aunt that hadn't seen me for a while was concerned about, because she'd noticed because my weight loss initially was quite subtle and happened over time, and she was concerned because she hadn't seen me in quite a while. But that was the only time I really remember anyone saying anything or making note of it, besides obviously my parents' concern. But I don't remember ever getting a compliment. What it feels to me like so much of my teenage years I don't have memories of, so I can't really remember anything, but there's nothing that sticks out in my mind of anybody complimenting me. I feel like I was very shut down to what was coming in from the outside world because I was really in my own bubble.
Okay, and you also mentioned that you were suppressing pain. No one was ever going to cause pain to you. Then did the anorexia disorder cause more pain? Didn't you feel the feeling? Did you feel more pain with inside?
Not in my time of it at all. I felt much more numb. So it allowed me to, yeah, I definitely not when I was in it, but destructively, long term, it caused massive destruction. It caused a lot of guilt. There was also a lot of guilt about the pain that I was causing my family, the the awareness that I have 5 other sisters, so the awareness that my illness was taking my parents' attention away from them. I was really acutely aware of that. And so I had a level of guilt about that and a lot of shame. But again, I was able to, anytime the shame popped up, I could kind of exercise it away or starve it away. And I went through a period of bulimia. So I was able to binge it and purge it away. So I quickly found, like, I found different ways of getting rid of the pain through using the eating disorder, if that makes sense. But long term, it's caused a lot of physiological stuff. I obviously wasted 20 years of my life. There was lots of things longer term that I've had to heal and resolve because of it. But at the time, any pain I felt, it just drove me deeper into this tool to eradicate the pain.
Now, did you step into the kind of arena of bulimia while trying to, get back healthy from anorexia, or
Yes.
that's how? Yeah, I
Yes.
assume because they're trying to get you to eat, and
Yeah.
you kind of
And
refuse to
and I
let
was
go.
yeah, and I was trying to do it myself. And there's also a period where I was just, your body is just so starving for food that when you start to fuel it, it's like a child who's been sick for a week and they don't eat in that week. When they come back from that, they're starving and they'll eat a whole load to make up for the energy that they didn't have in that time. And it was exactly the same when you're recovering from anorexia. There's this really scary time when your body realizes how starving it is, and it's almost like a primal sort of place in our bodies sees food and recognizes food, and it's like, I need more of this. When am I going to be deprived of it again? And so I went into this place of, I was trying to heal, but I went into this uncontrollable place of, I can't control the physiological urges to have more food, but then the disgust after having the food led me to purge, and it became a cycle as well, because it's very addictive as well.
Can you tell me so the audience can see? Because you hear anorexia and bulimia and it's
Mm-hmm.
different. Can you tell the audience how it's different?
Physiologically, anorexia is really, you're really just starving yourself. So you're not eating the calories that you need in order to thrive. So you're maybe basic survival, but absolutely not thriving. So, and for a lot of people with anorexia, they will also over exercise. There's lots of other stuff that can be involved, but those are the two main things. With bulimia, that's more binging and purging. So it's consuming lots of food and then vomiting it up afterwards. And often that is not a one-time process that happens. You will do that 4, 5, 6, 7 times until the level of exhaustion hits that you can't do it anymore, or you run out of food, or you run out of whatever. And often people will waver between the two, and I didn't know this. I thought you were either one or the other. But again, when you're in that place of recovery, you can waver between, I'll starve myself for 5 days and then go into get really, really, really hungry, have some food, and then go into that bulimic cycle. And then go back into, okay, I'm not doing that again because I hated that so much and have so much shame about the purging, that I will not eat, because I obviously food, I can't control how much food I eat, because then I just go into this binging. So they will go back into that starvation, and this can go on for people for a long time as well. And sorry, I forgot to mention, with both of them, there is an element of control. There is a lot of mental and emotional stuff going on underneath. There is usually a lot of dysregulation. There's a lack of coping skills. There's childhood stuff. There's a lot of stuff going on unhealed underneath it all. Because again, to use tools like that, to be in a place like that where you are so destructive towards your very basic functioning of a human being, takes there's an awful lot going on that's allowing you to do that, or making you do that.
Yes, yes. I have a question, because we don't always realize how kind of a thin line we're riding, sometimes, with just how we look at ourselves and things that we might say. I recall earlier at the month of August, I was really sick. I had a stomach bug, couldn't really eat for like 3 or 4 days. And like I jokingly said to myself, like, just looking in the mirror, like, dang, like everything looking flat. Like I look like, they might have paid off by not eating a few days. But in my mind, I'm like, that's really a sordid way to think. With that being said, do you, when you naturally have to, vomit, do things kind of get like triggered for you? Or like if you're really sick to a point where you're not keeping stuff down, is that kind of almost like a gateway back into what you were trying to get out of?
What a great question. Yes, it could potentially be. Can I tell you, I have not vomited since I've recovered at all. And I don't think after I I only went when I had bulimia, it was in my early 20s, and even since then I have not vomited. Like, I've never had a tummy bug. Even my child has never brought home a tummy bug. So that's an amazing blessing. But when I was pregnant, I had morning sickness for a very long time, for like 17 weeks, and that was really hard. However, I wasn't fully recovered then. I was physiologically much more recovered, obviously, to be able to conceive, but mentally I wasn't. And I will say that I am very strong now about not missing meals and stuff, not because I'm afraid that I will need that tool anymore, because I feel I've done enough of the inner work that I don't need to use that. But I'm also really conscious that our brains can be like, the chemicals in our brains that are released when we do stuff like starve, or we are starving, can be quite addictive. And for me, it's just a place I don't want to go anymore. So I am really conscious about not missing meals. I'm really conscious, even if it's just something small I eat, I'm really conscious that if for some reason, like when we have a really bad bug or like a head cold or something, and you're just feeling really, really out of it, if I do end up missing meals because my body is just like, I cannot tolerate anything, that I quickly get back on track. As soon as I'm well, it's like, okay, back on track. It's not even a question for me, because I know I don't want to challenge myself to risk it. I've fought too hard to get to where I am today, that I'm not willing to risk it just to have that sort of endorphin rush or that dopamine hit that I might get from thinking, yeah, oh wow, everything looks nice and flat. I don't know that I'd go there. I don't feel I would, but I'm not willing to risk it. It's like a bit like an alcoholic. Maybe they can have a small drink, maybe they can't. With food, we can't. You can't choose to have a little. It's not a case of I can choose not to eat or I can choose to eat. I have to eat, and I have to make sure I do it. So I don't even dabble in the dieting world or the intermittent fasting or all the other things that are going around out there that might be amazing for other people. That can't be my journey.
Understood. Did the anorexic disorder, bulimia, cause any internal damage, and did that create a piece of your high functioning anxiety?
I have always had high functioning anxiety, even growing up. My family, my mum would always say, oh, you're such a worry word. So I didn't recognize it as anxiety. I worked in the mental health field and I still didn't recognize that what I had was anxiety, because it was so high functioning. So I've had that pretty much my whole life. And I definitely think it probably contributed to the anorexia rather than the other way around. But I think both of them were combined along the way. So I'm sorry, I've forgotten what you asked about before. Oh, the internal damage.
Internal damage,
yes.
Yeah.
So I struggled with infertility. I was told I would never have a child. And that I was told I would never recover from anorexia. Full stop. That people who have it long term never recover. You only ever become more high functioning. And I have a lot of dental issues. So really weak teeth, like I have a whole load of fillings. I've had dental extractions. I also have very weak bones, because obviously malnutrition for decades does that. And I did have a lot of gut issues, but they have mostly resolved further along my healing I've gone. They definitely resolved. So I think the biggest issues are the biggest long-term issues that I'm going to have to live with are definitely the weak bones and the weak teeth.
Wow, wow. And that's just a testament to the long-term effects.
Mm-hmm.
So we always like to know the good, bad, and the ugly. So thank you for sharing that with
Mm-hmm.
us. Um, my next question is, after, getting pregnant, um, I know it wasn't necessarily your kind of version of the eating disorder, but um, how does it necessarily work for, women going through pregnancy, but are, worried about their weight to a effect that it, does cause an eating disorder? How, I'm not sure if that affected you that way. But, how was the pregnancy for you, coming off of these eating disorders, and how did you make adjustments to, kind of make yourself healthy to be a vessel for your child?
Mm-hmm. I think I've done quite a bit of physiological work leading up to getting pregnant, because I initially got pregnant and had a miscarriage, and then it took another couple of years to conceive our son. So in that time, I've been building myself up physically, because I knew that in order to be able to carry a healthy pregnancy, I had to be a healthier weight. I had to be able to fuel myself, because I was going to be fueling this baby inside of me. And right from the get-go of starting to conceive, I think that was probably when my journey started to turn, because there was some reason bigger than me to heal. And I know for pregnancy it can be tricky for a lot of people, but for me it felt very freeing, because it was like the first time ever that I felt I could just eat whatever I wanted, because there was a reason bigger than me to do it. Um, yeah, so for other people, I know it can be really triggering, because you can gain the weight and there's so much pressure to get your body back and to do all of the rest of the stuff. But at the time, for me, holding on to this pregnancy, given I'd already lost one beforehand, was the most important thing. And if that meant I had to eat, and that meant I had to rest, and that meant I had to do all of the things, then that was what I was going to do. And when I have a very determined mind, which can be used both destructively and constructively. But when I focused on that in my pregnancy, it meant eating was easy. It was just something I had to do to bring alive this baby inside of me.
I was going to ask, did you, and you may have already asked it, but even that determination and say, I'm going to be healthy, did you ever get an urge to say, because, we put on weight as we're gaining pregnancy, to say, I have an urge, but I'm not going to do it. But did you ever get an urge, that thought in your head while pregnant?
Not when I was pregnant, no. But after I had our son, I regressed in the first year that he was born. I regressed in the anorexia behaviors. He was a really tricky child, really tricky baby. And but it wasn't because I chose to. Again, it was because it was a coping mechanism. So when I look at the anorexia, the whole time it was a coping mechanism for the stress that I was feeling, for the pain that I was feeling. I did not know how to handle this child. Everything I felt I was doing felt like it was wrong. Other people seemed to have these babies that they could connect with, that they were bonded with, that did what babies are supposed to do, and mine did not. And so the level of stress I was feeling, my appetite went. I walked, because that was my only way of keeping my child quiet. But also, it was a way that felt good for me. So I did regress in that first year after he was born. And it was after that I realized that there was a lot of that my child was different and that I needed to be an advocate for him. And it was after that my healing really took a big step forward, because I decided that I needed to heal for my child. And it wasn't just physical healing, it was that I needed to heal at a much deeper level so I didn't pass my crap onto him.
Absolutely, that is the main goal. For people that have been through trauma and they bringing other lives into this world. Now, my question is, being as though you got into these disorders just based off of it was kind of just your vice in a sense, so you were self-medicating with it. Would you say that after your child was born, I'm not sure how your relationship was with your child as a mother, but would you say that maybe you traded one addiction for the next? Was was your kind of build up as a mother kind of rocky? Were you super protective over him? Were you way in your head about what you are eating so that you can feed him? Did it turn into another type of obsessive form of thinking outside of being in the disorder?
Yeah, again, a great question. It did to do with healing, and it did to do with supporting him initially. Absolutely, it did. It was, I need to be able to support him to have the highest quality of life he can have. That was definitely a big focus, and it became, I got hyper focused on my healing as well. Hyper focused on my physical healing, hyper focused and on his healing journey as well, and taking him along on his healing journey. So that absolutely happened. And then somewhere along the line, it clicked for me that it was just, it was like that next thing, but it was in that place in my healing journey that I could see that and that I could heal that. So I was able to see that. Whereas before, when I was just in more destructive behavior, I wasn't able to see that happening. But absolutely, because that I used to think that was who I was. I was kind of obsessive. So if that was my obsession, that was my obsession. If it moved off that, it was onto this. And so it definitely became my healing so I could be the best mom for him. My healing so I could support him the best and being the best mom. But that's just an endless thing. I mean, we can never be a perfect parent because it's such thing doesn't exist. We're just human in all our messiness, and I had to learn that too.
Okay, and you're in New Zealand, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we're virtual in New Zealand.
Yay!
So yes, our first, yes.
Yeah. So when I was 21,
Mm-hmm.
I suppose my eating disorder was high functioning enough that I was able to travel. So I decided I was leaving Ireland. I was leaving that identity behind. I was essentially when I look back, away from myself and from everything I knew, and I traveled to Australia to backpack around Australia for a year. The problem was that when I got to Australia, I was still with me. I hadn't left myself behind. I hadn't left my eating disorder. It had all come with me. So I traveled around Australia for a year, and I met my now husband when I was in Australia, and he's a New Zealander. So I then moved to New Zealand and ended up marrying him, and I've been here ever since.
Yay. See, it's a good, and you love New Zealand.
New Zealand's my home now. I'm very blessed. I have two homes. Ireland is also my home, but it is not my now home. It is a place I go and visit and connect with family and all of the beauty that's in Ireland. However, New Zealand is my now home, and it's a really good place to bring up a child, and it's definitely where my heart is now.
Okay. So I want to ask really quick, can you tell us some of the things that you did to start your journey to healing, some techniques for the audience to give them an idea, I'm going through anorexic or I'm going through bulimia. These are strategies that I can use to help me start the journey to healing.
Mhm. So the first one, and I think it's the most important, and I wish somebody had told me at the beginning of my journey, is that there is nothing wrong with you. So this this anorexia, this addiction, this bulimia, whatever it is a coping strategy. It is like a coping tool that you have found that feels effective right now, even if it's destructive. But there's nothing wrong with you in that, and you're not broken, because the shame that we hold about the brokenness that we feel inside just exacerbates the behavior. It makes us, because when we think there's something so wrong with us, we're going to keep doing the destructive behavior because that feels too painful to look at. So that is number one, is trying to release the shame and just being in this place that there's nothing wrong with me. I'm not broken. I'm not some awful person. I'm not disgusting because of the behavior. It's a coping mechanism. That is number one. The tools that I used, inner child healing, was massive. I had a lot to heal in my inner child, to come to a place of acceptance within myself about all of who I was, about the parts of me that were coming up still, and the parts that were coming up in my motherhood journey that I still didn't like very much, and still do. They still keep popping up, because healing is a never-ending journey. So inner child healing, regulating my nervous system, was the foundational thing that changed everything for me, because I studied psychology. I worked with therapists. I had been on my own sort of self-help journey, trying to figure myself out and heal myself since I was 14. Nothing worked until I started regulating my nervous system, which is why it's the foundational work that I put in place with the people I'm supporting. Because if we are very dysregulated, we don't feel safe in our bodies. We don't feel safe in the external world, or our external environment doesn't feel safe. Even if logically it is, we may not feel it. And when we don't feel safe, we're going to put up self-protective barriers. Mine being anorexia, somebody else is being an addiction, somebody else is being people pleasing, whatever it is. We have all of these tools to support us to feel safe and protected. When I could create safety in my body, safety in my immediate environment, then I was able to allow myself to heal. So, and there was other stuff. Then I had to reprogram my subconscious, reprogram my beliefs, all of that. But essentially, there was the recognition that I wasn't broken and regulating my nervous system.
And what would you say are some of the biggest pillars or takeaways from what you're doing with healing through motherhood? What is kind of your I guess your mission or your goals with the people that you're helping out with healing through motherhood, and what is that all about?
Yeah, so like I said at the beginning, my big thing is for mums to know they can have this freedom by connecting with themselves. So freedom not being external freedom, but because most of us in this day and age have a level of external freedom, but it's freedom from inside, being able to have this inner peace inside to bring all of you to the world. So to be able to connect with your children, to be authentic in the world, to be vulnerable and still feel safe, to be accepted by other people for who you are, not to feel like you have to hide or squash any of yourself anymore. And through doing this, we are role modeling for our kids what it is like for them to be all of them. We are role modeling for them that it's okay to be them in their messiness, in their quirkiness, in whatever they bring to the world, that is special and unique, and that there is freedom in that, rather than feeling that they have to be trapped and confined by boxes that we often squashed ourselves into. So because I feel it has such a ripple down effect. And as mums, we are really big catalysts in how our children live their lives and in the future that they can potentially have, not just in how we advocate for them, but in how we role model how we live our lives. And so healing through motherhood can look like so many different avenues. For me, it could look like healing that, it could look like healing, that anxiety, but it's also stepping into who we really are and who we're here to be, and our purpose in life, our, whether our mission feels big or small, it's about being able to live that mission and to live fully alive. Because essentially, isn't that what most of us want to be able to do, is to live fully alive as who we are, rather than feeling that some of that has to be hidden or squashed, or that there's no value in that. Like, knowing that there's value in us just being who we really are is incredibly liberating.
It's very liberating.
Mm-hmm.
It's like I take accountability, I forgive myself, and I'm gonna start the journey to healing. I have one final thing to ask
Mm-hmm.
you. And healing, that's all we talk about is healing, 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 and healing is good. So going through the transition into healing, can you tell folks that are in denial about anorexia and bulimia some of the signs so that they can start the journey to healing?
Mm-hmm.
That they can
So,
recognize the signs? Because I'm pretty sure a lot of people are in denial of the signs.
so much, and I love that you've brought this up. This is huge, especially in high functioning, because and it's huge because it's eating disorders have slipped into that whole orthorexia as well, where it's like, I'm eating really healthy. So what I would say is the biggest thing is, if food and or exercise has a grip on you and has a level of control over you. So you are spending a lot of time thinking about food, thinking about how not to eat, with a fear of food, with counting calories, checking the backs of labels in the supermarket for how much calories or the nutritional content of food. That is a really big trigger. That is a, and I like that is a cue that the food has a level of control over you, and it's controlling you more than you're controlling it. If you feel you have to get out and exercise, if you feel like your day is not the way it should be if you don't get out and exercise, it's if you feel you have to eat certain things, otherwise you don't feel good. When it has this level of grip over us, it can be, those are the subtle signs, but they're there. If you don't maintain a certain weight or a certain size, then you start to feel really awful about yourself. You can't ebb and flow with food. You can't ebb and flow with social gatherings, because you're afraid about where you might be eating, about what food might be there, about your level of control around food. These are things. And then there is, obviously, you go, another layer then is when you're restricting yourself based on what you identifying food as good or bad, labeling it as too much or too little. And it falls, the same thing falls into the exercise. You have to do a certain amount or you can't feel good about yourself. And then judging yourself based on the clothes you fit into. So there's so many layers to it, and these are just the more obvious ones, but I see a lot of mums falling into this, where they limit what they eat, or they only eat the dregs of their kid, what the kids have left over, so because they don't think they're good enough to eat proper food, or they don't think they're good enough to eat like a proper meal, a full meal, and they'll restrict throughout the day, because under the guise of there's not enough time. There's always enough time. You're your child's biggest, if you don't fuel you, you don't have as much to give to your children. So there is a lot of subtle ways, and a lot of the more obvious ways. The more obvious ways, people know. If you're starving yourself, you've got an issue with food. If you're binging and throwing up, you've got an issue with food. But it's the more subtle ways that people can be in denial around, where on anorexia, like where you're limiting food but you're still an okay weight. That is a really big one. People think, I'm not sick enough to be classed as anorexia. I'm not sick enough because my weight isn't low enough, or I'm not emaciated enough, or I'm not thin enough, therefore I can't have anorexia. That is total baloney. You can be anorexic at a plus size, because you're just still limiting what you need to eat.
That's wonderful. That's super insightful. Our last question to wrap this up here, well, not really a question, but moment for yourself. So we like to call this shameless plug. You see all of your information scrolling here at the bottom. Let the viewers know how they can reach you, how they might be able to utilize your services. Let the viewers know any projects you have going on, anything you want to draw traffic to. You have the stage.
Oh, thank you. So you'll find me on Facebook at Avril Brown, on Instagram at Avril1Brown. I have a free ebook on nervous system regulation if anyone wants to reach out for that. It is a great resource for getting started. And yeah, and at the moment I work one-on-one with mums, and it's very much, we do an individually tailored program. So it's what is coming up for you, because some people come with eating disorders, some people come with struggles with their kids. It always evolves. It all starts with us. And that's my biggest thing, is to remind people that if you're struggling in motherhood, it starts with us. It's us first, and then everything else. And yeah, anyone who just wants to reach out for a chat, please know that you are not alone. If you're struggling, you are not alone, and you do not have to do this alone. It can be a really lonely journey. Motherhood can be a lonely journey. If you're struggling with an eating disorder or mental health issues in motherhood, it can be even lonelier, because all you see everywhere is really happy faces and really happy families. I promise you, you're not alone. And you also don't have to do it alone. You deserve better. And life can be so full, no matter what you have been through, no matter what your past is, no matter what your story is. Life can be, and you deserve to live it really fully alive, thriving with your children. Honestly, life gets to be this good.
Love it. We want to thank you, Avril, for coming on, sharing your life experience. And I hope that you honestly touch someone that is going through a similar situation. Please check Avril out if you're if you have a child or you're going through anorexia disorder or bulimia. She definitely has a story to tell, and you can relate to her. And she's open to sharing her life experience and helping and giving you some advice to help you through that journey. So we want to thank you for tuning in to Unfiltered Unspoken Podcast, where we're going to continue to share life experiences in hopes that someone will connect so that they can start the journey to healing. And we will see you soon.